Welcome to this special presentation from FedGov Today, AI for Agencies, Modernization and Taxpayer Service, presented by IBM. I'm the host of FedGov Today, Francis Rose. The Internal Revenue Service aims to be what its commissioner, Danny Werfel, calls a, quote, service organization first and foremost. It's using millions of the $80 billion it will receive from the Inflation Reduction Act to improve the interactions taxpayers have with the agency. Those improvements will come on a number of levels. On this program, you'll learn how the IRS is tackling AI solutions, improving its IT infrastructure after decades of challenges, and how it's recruiting, retaining, and retraining its workforce to meet the expectations of taxpayers and Congress in the 21st century. We begin with Vanessa Hunt, General Manager for Technology for the U.S. federal market for IBM. Vanessa, welcome. Thanks for joining me. First and foremost, among agencies, they tell me they're doing use cases first with AI, not AI first. What's the significance of that, and is that your view on the right way to go?
Yes, Francis, I think it absolutely is the right way to go. So a use case-driven approach allows us to look at what are some of the common tasks, processes, and challenges across business functions, everything from HR, legal, procurement. That way we can take these measurable, quick wins that we're finding with the AI and really scale them throughout the organization. Now, we're lucky in IBM to work with many clients within the federal government as well as globally. And we've seen that really three main use cases seem to pop up as being really easily impacted by generative AI. And those are application modernization, client experience, and digital labor. And within IBM, we've been on our own journey looking at how we can digitally transform, applying our own AI and hybrid cloud technology internally to improve productivity. And you'll hear later today from Mike Chan, my colleague from IBM HR, who will talk about how we did this within the HR organization to really develop a very personalized self-service solution in HR within IBM.
A lot of the conversations that people are having in government revolve around the development of the original use case. How does one know, okay, we've tested this to a degree that we're satisfied with, and
Yes.
we can scale? Use that word scale, and I
Yes.
think that's very important.
Yes, well, I think first of all, it's identifying what is the right use case for the agency, right? And that we really try to look at value, return on investment, that really should be very personal to the agency and their mission and their objectives. And of course, we do need to balance that with things like cost, availability of the data, the expertise. I will say within IBM, we like to ensure that we will have a return on investment of 200% productivity with any of these use cases within 6 months.
How does one go about measuring that in a public sector environment where there's not necessarily a dollar value to attach? Maybe there is, but it's not the same as in a private sector
Right,
environment.
it's a great point, Francis, and I think it really should be a part of that project is ensuring that you are measuring the outcomes. Because listen, not everything will work, and that's okay as long as you know it's not working quickly and you can pivot. So measuring the value, the impact is critically important.
When agencies determine that it is time to scale, are there common threads among the steps that one takes, or is it just as simple as doing more of that, whatever was doing in the test that worked?
It can be. Of course, we do also need to understand lessons learned from how did it work. So if we are, with the IBM example, if we are looking at this digital transformation within HR, we're going to take any lessons learned there before we move it or scale it across the other business functions.
Another item that we'll talk about on this program is grafting cutting-edge technology like AI into situations where that doesn't necessarily hold for the entire organization, where there are legacy applications, legacy infrastructure. What are some of the issues that you've seen with agencies across government or around the world that are trying to do that?
Yeah, I don't know that there's issues that I see, but I do think there are some things they need to keep in mind. I think governance is critically important. I do think that that's one of the areas where IBM really differentiates with our What's Next for governance. Governance model really helps to ensure the quality and the transparency of the solution. It really minimizes the risk while maximizing the value of the data and really setting the agency up for long-term success. I also think clients need to think about really advocating for open source to really help improve innovation and transparency and interoperability. And then, of course, they need to think about ensuring that they have an AI-ready workforce. So upskilling their talent where that's appropriate, and then just the culture aspect, right, of is this workforce ready for this journey? Do they understand the benefits for themselves and their organization, that where there are productivity gains, that will free them up to focus on higher value tasks, more strategic work. And of course, within IBM, where we see productivity gains, we're then able to invest that in further innovation for our organization.
Open source is turning into almost a buzzword right now in a number of different areas across government, particularly when it comes to data and the data flow that underpins artificial intelligence. Is that, when you're talking about open source, is that what you're referring to, the ability of agencies to control their data and use it in a number of different applications, maybe from your competitors or whatever?
Yes, I think from an agency perspective, if they take an open source approach, it really allows them to avoid vendor lock-in, which we are sort of at an early stage of this journey, so I think that's important for them. It also, as I said, it allows them to have more transparency into the development and more minds, looking at the product and helping to innovate and further develop the product. Is
getting to that open source ideal as simple as just writing it into the contracts, or is there more to it than that? Is that a cultural issue potentially also?
I think, Francis, it's absolutely cultural. It's about the approach that they take. And it's not one size fits all. It's not that it needs, there's certainly areas where an open source solution is not the right one for the federal government, but where it's appropriate, I think that's what we would recommend.
Yeah, overall, what do you see agencies doing well, and what are they struggling with as they're getting to any of this analysis that we're talking about, whether it's the use cases, whether it's scaling them, and so on?
I think they're doing really well. I'm actually very impressed by the speed that the federal government is taking in trying to embrace this technology. I think the thing that we all need to be concerned about, again, is the governance piece, is ensuring that we have the right guardrails that don't, hamper the innovation, but ensure that we have a trusted, quality, transparent product at the end of the journey.
We have experts, obviously, from IRS on this program today.
Yes.
Are the challenges and the things that they're thinking about from a governance perspective going to be the same as their peers and friends from other agencies, or is it dependent on the mission of the organization, the way the infrastructure is set up within the organization, or other factors?
Of course, there are differences agency to agency in terms of the sensitivity of the mission, of the data, but I do think there are solutions, again, like what's next for governance, that really would apply to any agency and would ensure that they can have that transparency into the data, into the decisions that are being made, how and why.
You've made your feelings about governance very clear. Yes. in the process of this conversation, Vanessa. You also talked about customer experience and digital as two other areas where you think there's a lot of potential for artificial intelligence. How do you want to see agencies try to maximize both of those areas too?
I think in that same way, what is an easy use case that they can get started with and then scale? So as they see success with digital labor, helping them with certain processes, how can we then scale that across the organization?
The use case situation, and we started there at the beginning of this conversation, that situation is challenging for agencies at the same time that it's a benefit, because there are times where they have to tell somebody, this really isn't an artificial intelligence idea. This isn't something that we need to use this technology for.
Right.
How does one go about doing that effectively, and how does one know to discern, yeah, the technology can do this, but it's not necessarily the best way to pursue this solution?
Right. I think it's all about identifying what their goals are from the beginning. So like I said, within IBM, we have certain goals of where we think what we think an appropriate use case is. I think agencies need to do the same and then see what fits into that bucket and what doesn't. Lots of times it's not that AI isn't the right solution, it's just that how much can you do at one time? So which use cases really can scale, really can help them achieve their missions, versus others that are nice to have but maybe are not priorities.
About 30 seconds left. We focused on what's happening now. What's over the horizon? What do you see coming that people in government should be thinking about today?
Yes, well, again, IBM has been at this for a long time. We've been a leader in the AI space for 70 years, but we still are at our infancy on this journey. So a lot of the use cases that we're seeing are very simple. They're having a huge impact, but I think that agencies need to think about what could be next for them. What is the benefit and value when they unlock, more complicated data sets and use cases?
Vanessa, it's great to have you on the program.
Great
Thanks
to see you,
very much for
Francis.
joining
Thank
me.
you.
You can read more about use cases for AI at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, closing the customer experience gap. AI for agencies continues in a moment. Don't go away.
Before you use AI to transform business, accelerate growth, predict trends, you need to begin with trust. Introducing Watson X Governance, helping you govern any AI as data, models, and policies change, so you can scale it responsibly.
Here we go.
Let's create AI that begins with trust with Watson X Governance. IBM, let's create.
Welcome back. You learned in the first part of this program how use cases should drive the implementation of artificial intelligence in organizations. The Internal Revenue Service is taking a use case first approach to AI. To tell you more, Reza Rashidi, Director of Data Management in the Research, Applied Analytics and Statistics Division at IRS, and Jason Pro, Senior Partner for Data and Tech Transformation for the U.S. federal market for IBM Consulting. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. Reza, I start with you. What are some examples of use cases where you're using AI within the agency?
In general, at IRS, we use AI in 3 different areas. One is in improving taxpayer service, and second one would be in compliance functions, in supporting various compliance activities, and the third would be in introducing operational efficiencies in any aspects of internal operations.
How do you go about evaluating the opportunities that you have in each of those areas to determine if AI is the right fit, or determine what kind of artificial intelligence applications are the right fits?
That's a very good question. We start with a business problem to solve. We don't do AI for the sake of doing AI. So we work very closely with the business units in identifying the problem they would like to solve. And if the problem that they'd like to solve mainly benefits from automation, traditional type of automation, that doesn't necessarily need AI. But if there is some aspect of the problem that can benefit from using an AI to make decisions or influence decisions, that's where we would look at various aspects of AI.
You touch on something that I think is an important distinction, because 3, 4, 5 years ago, there was an automation kind of revolution across the executive branch of the government, and a lot of folks got involved with RPA, and I think there's still a perception among the rank and file workforce that AI isn't much different. It sounds like, from the way you just described it, it's a lot different. Is that a fair read on my part?
I agree with that. Robotics process automation is essentially sometimes they define that in different classes. At the simplest class, it's really automating very routine manual tasks, and it doesn't involve any decision making or AI. But if robotics process automation is integrated with some kind of an automated decision making where you can benefit from a model, an AI model, then it could also integrate AI. Just like any other information systems. All information systems or applications are essentially about automating some kind of a business process. Then they may or may not benefit and introduce additional further automation by utilizing an AI model.
Jason, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. You were nodding your head very enthusiastically as Reza was talking, in particular about the difference between automation and the way people are using AI. What's the main difference that you're seeing as far as the way people are using these tools across government?
Yeah, absolutely. And what Reza said was spot on, right? RPA is a little bit more mundane and rules-based, right? You're configuring the technology to take a certain action. But with AI, you get a little bit more reasoning. Right, you get the ability to understand and interact with natural language, right, and you get a little bit more decision making, right. So that's really helped in improving the kind of personalized service that can be provided to the citizen or to the workforce. So allowing individuals to interact with technology the way you or I would interact, which is a huge advance in the way that people are interacting with technology. I think the second part of it too is really around driving that efficiency, right? Really helping to accelerate decision making that hasn't been available before, right? So allowing the workforce to actually do the decision making as opposed to the gathering and consolidation of information.
How have you seen organizations be successful at merging cutting edge technologies like AI with the infrastructures that they have already? You can't just take the old infrastructure out, put new ones in, and go forward with this kind of technology.
Yeah, it's been with the advancement of cloud technology that's also allowed them to bridge the gap, right, where you have cloud capability that's able to interact with some of the legacy infrastructure. And I think the second part of it is technology itself has really began to embed AI, right, that allows the technology itself to do more of the work as opposed, right, to actually, developing the specific algorithms or things of that nature.
Reza, what are some of the challenges you've run up against in implementing AI solutions at the agency?
The main issues has not been really from the technology perspective. We have an approach where, especially in the area that I work in research applied analytics and statistics, where it's sort of an incubation area when we incubate new model technologies, and then we closely collaborate with our IT organization to scale those solutions to the entire enterprise. So I wouldn't say that technology has been the issue. The challenging has been, in order to make sure that we get the AI right. We are implementing it in a very responsible manner, because if you're delegating a decision making to the machine, you need to make sure that you can explain how the machine has made the decision, and you have and it's doing the decision making in a correct manner. So that's really the most challenging thing. I can give you some examples of very easy type of problems. Like one of the easy problems to state is, why can't we use AI like ChatGPT to answer all my questions? We are starting to explore applying those things with internal situations, because as you know, in ChatGPT, they're really good in basically imitating answers or intuitively providing an answers, but whether that's factually correct or not, there's been examples where there are, we cannot guarantee that. So we're starting to use those type of technologies internally in a small and very defined problems in a controlled setting. And as we prove those out, we work with our IT organization to scale that and bring it to the organization.
Several leaders that I've talked to across government talk about using kind of programs like you just talked about only on their own data rather than just on whatever data is available. It sounds like that's kind of the track that you're headed on?
That's absolutely correct. For example, if we want to, we have a lot of internal documentation, and we are trying to build using AI solutions that, similar to ChatGPT, that our customer service representatives or internal, staff can use to access information easily. So we need to make sure that the responses come from our own document set, as opposed to the publicly available documents where the large language models have been trained on. So there are mechanisms to do that, and we're building a lot of pilots, and we're testing those right now extensively, more in internal settings.
Jason, how does one go about gauging the success of a pilot like Reza just talked about? What are the factors that make someone say, this worked exactly the way that we wanted it to, maybe we got different results than we thought, but it worked well, or this didn't really work at all and we need to either go in a different direction, or maybe this just isn't something that's going to work for us?
Yeah, I think the first element, right, is the accuracy or quality of the response, right?
Exactly.
Getting the response that you would expect to get from the interaction with any AI. I think the other part of it too is, what doesn't get talked about a lot too is also what is going to be the cost component to this. There's a lot of desire to leverage AI, right, without kind of understanding the implication of underlying processing capacity that's required. So not just the accuracy, but when you look at it longer term, what is going to be the cost of scaling this, and is the most effective way to do that?
That's exactly what your colleague Vanessa referred to at the beginning part of this program about the value, the ROI proposition. Yeah. How does one go about evaluating that effectively, Jason?
Yeah, so in the government, right, you're really focused on how do you reduce the amount of time or reduce the backlog associated with a given task, because we're really trying to give time back to the workforce to complete the mission critical tasks that are on their plate. So I think that's a driving factor when you're looking at the return and how you define it. And then there's obviously always a cost component to it as well, right? And looking at how could you do it in a more traditional manner, right, by leveraging maybe less sophisticated technology, and do you get the same amount of return or a similar amount of return? Or is this really the right use of technology, understanding the cost element as well?
That's similar, Reza, to the way that you talked about evaluating these programs at the beginning of our conversation. How do you tell somebody that maybe was really excited about a potential AI application, you don't really need that? I guess that kind of gets at the cultural issue a little bit, that maybe is more of a challenge than the technology piece, right?
That's a very interesting question, because I think you need to understand, why do they think they need that, and what is the problem they're trying to solve, and is this the right solution for the problem? I think that's really the core part of answering that question. One thing I wanted to add to what Jason said, one of the other factors that's really interesting, especially in the taxpayer service or customer service in our case, is also the quality of improvements in the taxpayer service. How much time are we saving the taxpayers, and how quickly getting their issues resolved? One of the areas we are using AI, for example, in that area is basically trying to understand and identify the pain points that our taxpayers are going through. We see that a large portion of our taxpayers basically they file a return and they get the refund, so that's a typical journey within the right time. But then the smaller percentage where they might encounter issues, they have many phone calls, they have many visits. We try to understand what is the pain point that these taxpayers are experiencing, and then work with the different programs to see how that whole process can be improved in providing answers to that. So that's another way that we can measure the impact of introducing new technology or improving that service, and whether we have improved the taxpayer service, the duration, or reduced the number of times they have to call IRS to get an answer, and things like that. The
good news too, Jason, is just about every agency has undertaken an effort to make sure that they understand their customer journeys, to know where those pain points are, as Reza referred to them, and to be able to then think about how to use technology to address them.
That's correct, right? And that having that customer at the center of any IT program is central, right, to the success, right? Because what we're trying to do is to improve an outcome, right, and to improve an experience, and especially when you're talking about critical services such as a tax filing and return, you want it to be accurate, right, and you want it to be timely, right, and those are the things that matter most to those that interacts with the IRS.
At the beginning of this conversation, Jason, Reza laid out taxpayer service, compliance, and efficiency as the three main areas that they're looking at the IRS. Does that fit with what you're seeing at other agencies across government, or are there other areas where people are thinking about AI technologies too?
I think 100%, right? And I think underlying the improved service or citizen service is, I think there's the application also to produce the analytics around how individuals are interacting with the organization, right? So I think you get some better insight into those interactions. But the three core around compliance, improving productivity, or driving efficiency, and the service is exactly right.
You were nodding pretty enthusiastically when Jason was talking about kind of gaining it sounds like a broader view, in addition to the one-on-one, the individual experience, the broader customer experience. You're getting some visibility there too.
Yeah, specifically when he was talking about the analytics, that's in order to identify what are the pain points of a group of taxpayers. Essentially, you're looking at your customers and segmenting them and identifying the segment that's encountering issues. That really comes with the analytics that we're doing in the back end, and we're using AI in understanding what the taxpayer's issue was and how did the process answer the taxpayers, provide the service to the taxpayer, and identifying what improvements can be implemented. So that is actually a big area of using AI in the back office, which we've been doing that for quite some time actually at IRS.
You used an interesting term earlier when you were talking about how these projects mature. You talked about incubating these projects. That conjures an image in my mind of something that is forming and maturing and growing, and not just an IT project that you're working on. Is that the nature of the way that you think about the way you develop these at the agency?
Yes, specifically the area that I'm involved in. So when we talk about AI, it's really about the modeling part of it, and then there's a system that AI is engaged in. So first we need to understand and make sure that what we are building, the intelligence that we are building, is actually providing value, it's making the right decision before we can scale it and provide it to a large number of users or large number of use cases. That's an approach that we've had going on at IRS for quite some time, and I believe it's proven very fruitful, as opposed to, because you prove a technology, you prove an approach before you spend a lot of time and effort in trying to build that and scale that at an enterprise level.
Jason, we're almost out of time, so very quickly I'll ask you the same thing I asked your colleague in the first part of this conversation. What would you advise Reza and his colleagues and peers across government to think about now that maybe is over the horizon for them, not to deal with immediately, but could be coming down the road?
Yeah, absolutely. And to build off the points that were just made, as you scale AI-based technology, or you're infusing AI into large systems, it's a non-traditional IT system, right? So the monitoring and the governance to ensure that the model's producing the output that's expected, that it's not doing things like drift, that it's performing the way that it needs to. It requires a bit more monitoring of the performance, and to make sure that you have the people and the organization set up to do that.
Jason, Reza, thank you very much for joining me. It's great to have both of you on the program. You can read more about AI at the IRS at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, AI and the modernization journey. IRS lessons learned when AI for agencies continues in a moment.
People are excited about what AI will do for them. We're excited about what AI will do for business. Meet the Watson X Assistants, AI designed to multiply output by automating tasks. When you Watson X your business, you can use AI assistants to help coders code faster, customer service respond quicker, and employees handle repetitive tasks in less time. Let's create AI assistants that transform business with Watson X. IBM, let's create.
Welcome back. Use case development's an important step for agencies in using AI, but it's only one step. And agency leaders all over government caution their teams that AI is just a tool to improve applications and mission delivery. Kashit Pandya is Chief Technology Officer at IRS. Fred Collins is Distinguished Engineer for the U.S. Federal Market for IBM Consulting. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for joining me. Kashit, I start with you. To that point, where does AI fit into the spectrum now, the landscape of the technologies that you're using at IRS, given that you have legacy tech and you have some of the cutting-edge tools like AI?
Absolutely. AI is something that is not unfamiliar to the IRS. We have been leveraging AI in the traditional sense for decades, in fact. What we have been using is machine learning. Generative AI, on the other hand, is the new kid on the block, coming out relatively a couple of years ago, and it's created a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of buzz around the industry, personally and professionally, for all of us. And we are equally excited on how we want to leverage it. But we want to do it meaningfully, we want to do it methodically, and we want to do it intelligently. We have been applying AI and considering where and which cases we want to apply it against taxpayer services, back office operations. Because it can play such a pivotal role in how we provide services to our taxpayers as well as our back office operations, we're looking at it through the lens of where and how best to optimize, which means finding the right use cases. We want to make sure we're solving for a problem that we have versus AI being the hammer, looking for the nails to solve. So in that sense, whether it's legacy optimization or code conversion or looking for opportunities for us to do something with the taxpayer services, first identify the problem, then determine whether or not the technology can help solve that problem.
You hit on something there, Kashit, that I think is a misconception. I think there are a lot of folks that think that AI broadly is relatively new, and organizations like yours and others across government have been using it for a really long time in many cases.
Absolutely. We, and you heard from Reza earlier
Yes.
in the conversation, our RAS team, the research and analytics team, has been using AI and doing modeling and machine learning. We have been applying AI to identify fraud, for example. So machine learning is something that is not new to us. It's been used for many decades now. Generative AI is still in its infancy, but it is growing rapidly, and the enthusiasm around which it is being touted has generated not just the buzz, but has opened up a lot of different opportunities and possibilities of how best we can apply it. But once more, AI, like cloud, like any other technology, is a tool that can help you solve a problem as long as you've identified the problem first.
And identifying the problem first, it strikes me, Fred, is the major challenge. We learned about that earlier in the program. Is that what you see generating the buzz, the enthusiasm that Kashit talked about? Or is the chain different? I guess it's a chicken or egg question kind of, isn't it?
So one of the use cases that Kashit mentioned was code modernization, and the fact that this is an extension of human capability. It's human augmentation, not human replacement. So we're using generative AI as an extension for code modernization. We take an approach that's based in data science and linguistic theory, and we essentially reverse engineer the code into a language neutral model, much the way that a human who was bilingual could have multiple languages in their brain. We're able to have multiple languages in this model. And then we extract from that pseudocode and some initial Java code. Where the Gen AI comes into place is not to be like a one-stop, the code going through it. It's to augment what comes out of the traditional methods and generate natural language, generate well-structured Java. So it really greatly speeds up a laborious process. It allows us, it took years, and this really makes it a lot faster. And as an engineer, it allows you to focus on more creative, higher order activities rather than just being bogged down in it. It's really that augmentation that, for me, is exciting about where we're going with this.
From an engineer, did you want to follow on?
I think Fred touched on a really critical point, which is whether it's us applying AI to do fraud detection or back office optimization. We also have AI that help with voice bots, chat bots. There's always a human element involved. Always a human. So all those responses that you receive from your voice bots or your chat bots, there's a subject matter expert behind the scenes that is generating those responses that we're feeding into the AI. So the human element isn't lost, regardless of which technology, regardless of where we are applying that AI.
The concept of integrating artificial intelligence solutions into some legacy systems has been challenging, Fred, for agencies all across government.
Right.
Where have you seen that work well? What are the commonalities among the organizations who have done that well and have had success doing so?
So I think there is this way, doing it in a structured fashion, doing it in a safe fashion. So like generally the data tends to be the most sensitive. So using synthetic data, taking proxies for the code, maybe not the actual code, and then running it through an experiment and seeing, will this work? What type of benefit that you do? The other thing is you want to compare it with human methods. I mean, we mentioned sort of pair programming, the human always being in the loop, the fact that it's human augmentation, not human replacement, but you want to see, is it a case that's worth doing? Don't just, just because it's good from an AI perspective, look at what your real pain points were. For us at the IRS, it was extremely time consuming. There were certain tasks that were taking a very long time, and we found those use cases which were of high value, which we could do in a secure fashion and generated results that were meaningful, that had actual cost savings and time savings, and the results mirrored that of their human counterparts. And really, it was the right use case, doing it in a secure fashion, in a fashion that had governance, and one that yielded the results that we could measure against actual, the human augmentation that occurred.
Those kinds of gains, Kashit, it strikes me, there's two tracks here that you're thinking about. You're thinking about the way that AI integrates with the modernization effort that you're undertaking. And I imagine there's also a train of thought about how do we use AI to actually drive that modernization effort. That's something that might be a little newer. You said this is something you've been doing for a while, but maybe that piece of it is not quite as common.
Right, so driving modernization through AI, and Fred touched on it, we have a large legacy environment, and it is not any different than what other government agencies have, and I'm sure private industry is similarly. It's been built over many, many decades, and it was built using the best technology available at the time. However, that technology is not compatible with the more modern solutions that are available. Bridging the gap between that legacy and the more modern is always a challenge. Where we have looked for the right use cases for applying AI is how do you transform the legacy solutions and systems to the more modern. Now, there's no magic bullet with AI. You can't simply take the code from those old systems, apply AI, and voila, out it's the new. But what it has helped us with, AI specifically, and generative AI, is that it has allowed us to extract business logic from these older systems. That business logic is then used by our developers to write the more modern code against that logic. So we have seen tremendous gains from business extraction or the logic extraction, and then translation to the new language. We've seen it cut down from our ability to generate new code from days to hours on many occasions. And then one additional piece there is, as a former developer, is documentation. Always a bane of existence for developers, and we are seeing how much time it saves our developers by automatically letting it create those documentations and focus on programming rather than having to take the time, set it aside, and write the document.
You talked earlier in the conversation, Kashit, about how you're looking at AI through both a back office lens and a customer-facing lens. Do you have to take different things into consideration depending on which application or which direction you're going to push an application?
Absolutely. So when we look at back office operations, we want to look at where are those pain points that could be optimized by applying AI. Again, coming back to many references, whether it was Vanessa or Reza and Fred here, use case identification is key. So we want to find where optimization could be achieved through applying this technology. And in many cases, it is often a monotonous task that is identified. How many hours are we going to save by applying some automation and AI against it? What can we also do that enables our internal customers, therefore, to benefit from the efficiencies and then in turn help the taxpayers? So we're being a bit cautious right now in how we apply AI to taxpayer-facing services, and rightfully so. It's still a maturing technology, generative AI is, and it's changing rapidly and evolving fast. But it also comes with its own challenges, whether it's bias or hallucinations and drift. All of these things have to be taken into consideration. And with those considerations, we want to be careful about what we expose our taxpayers to, because they're looking to us to make sure that when they come to IRS, what data they're receiving is absolutely 100% accurate and factual.
Fred, is this the point in the process that Kashit just laid out there? Is this the point where agencies should be thinking about the business processes as well as the technological processes to determine, do we still really need to take however many steps that we're taking to reach whatever the end is? Is this the place to do that?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the neat things about what we're doing at the IRS is, assembly language, as Kashit pointed out, it's extremely difficult. It's machine language. And and you could probably fit all the ALC experts that exist in the world in this studio. Okay, there are not that many of them. So we convert it into a natural language, into business rules. Once you expose it from code into business rules, you can really think about reimagining those business processes. But you have to be able to see it, and that's one of the things where instead of like doing a one-for-one type of a conversion effort, which I just do not recommend to anyone, you really want to take that time to re-engineer, to reimagine it as a modern process and extract that, why do if you have an assembly report that's generated in assembly code, Why would you do it as Java? Why not do it as Tableau, Databricks? Reimagine it as a modern system, not a one-for-one reproduction. And that is what the IRS is doing. And that's why I'm so excited in working with them, is they allowed us to really, do this type of re-engineering type of an effort the right way that it needs to be done.
So the other thing that I hear when you describe the way that you go about doing that, Kashit, is you must not just have technology people at the table when you're having these conversations. You're having mission delivery partners at the table so that when that result comes out as Fred just described it, they can say, oh, you know what, we don't have to do it this way anymore.
Absolutely, and I think that is such a key point. There was the older model and approach, which is, as a technologist, when we look at system modernizations, we think about how do we rewrite the code, how do we take it from beginning all the way to the end in one fell swoop over a period of many, many years, and our customers will wait to reap the benefits once we're done with that modernization. The newer approach, the more traditional approach that we are now implementing and leveraging, it's an enterprise technology planning approach. We as an agency have to get together, not just as IT individuals, but IT, our business partners, the right senior leadership, making sure that we are all aligned on what we're trying to achieve. And then technology is more of an enabler for those outcomes rather than the leader, where again, we will implement and somebody will eventually benefit and use it, versus what is it that the business customers want, what is it our taxpayers can benefit from. Start with that in mind, apply the right technology to achieve that outcome.
Did that require either formally you or your mission partners to recreate governance, to recreate any policy, or did it just require a more informal process of, oh, we need to make sure that all of these people are involved, that all of these people are informed moving forward?
No, it absolutely required us to view that through the lens of transformation. And in doing so, we established a transformation office. The transformation office recognized that there are multiple business units, multiple functional and operational units, each which has the ultimate agenda of serving the taxpayer and helping the agency, but their focus areas are different. Transformation office was stood up so that it can bring all of them together, help us identify and prioritize what is it that we as an agency want to deliver, and again, heavily focused on taxpayer services and experience, and then within those, how can we achieve those outcomes, what role IT will play through its technology development and solution to help us achieve them.
Kashit, Fred, it's great to have both of you on the program today. Thanks very much for joining me. I appreciate you being here. You can read more at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the people piece of this technology breakthrough, AI for agencies, will continue in a moment.
If your business needs a new application, then developers will have to write code. A lot of code. If an application needs to be modernized, then you'll need time, resources, and caffeine. If this sounds daunting, then use Watson X Code Assistant. Built with IBM's Granite code model, it's AI designed to multiply developer productivity so you can generate code quickly. IBM, let's create.
Welcome back. So far on this show, you've learned about the process, forming use cases, developing strategies, implementation plans, and the technology behind AI implementation. Every federal agency leader will tell you that the remaining piece of the puzzle is people. To bring you that piece, Tracy DeMartini, the Chief Human Capital Officer at the IRS, and Mike Chan, Vice President and Partner for Talent Transformation in the U.S. federal market for IBM Consulting. Welcome, folks. Thanks very much for joining me. Tracy, there's two tracks, I guess, that you're pursuing on this. One is using the tools themselves to improve the hiring and retention and training process at the IRS. And the other is, how do you get the people in to be able to use these tools and do the jobs that they support?
Yes.
How are you working through both of those tracks at the same time?
So I'm glad you saved the best for last, which is, of course, people. People, we're all about people, especially at the IRS. And this gives us the opportunity to make life infinitely easier for our workforce and also for the customers we serve, the American taxpayer. So to your first question, we're looking at ways that this technology can help people answer questions quicker, kind of delve through a lot of information in a shorter amount of time. And, I always come with good stats.
Yes, you always have
and
numbers
I want to
for me.
give an example. Like, we had an amazing filing season in 2024 due all to our people at the IRS because we were able to hire so many people in taxpayer services. But we also were able to invest in our chatbots. And we had a 150% increase in the chatbot usage in 2024 because we had people training the system and knowing where to pull information makes life a lot easier for the customer service representatives who are doing God's work on those phones, helping American taxpayers during busy seasons, during filing season. And we went up 150%. 832,000 more questions were answered this taxpayer season. Then the other piece of it is our workforce, which is fabulous. The IRS has the best workforce in the federal government. We want to train our amazing IT talent on how to take advantage of AI, which is still developing. So we need the tech talent to come into the IRS to help, but also, as you mentioned, the back end, the people that are doing the hard work. So for HR, it would be my staff looking at ways to leverage AI to maybe write classification standards. I'm still going to need the workforce to validate it and to teach it what to do, but it's so exciting to think some of the tasks that are very labor intensive could be made much simpler. And that's where my good friend Mike Chong comes in, because we have partnered at other agencies on figuring out how to leverage the IT technology in HR.
One of the things that, Mike, that it strikes me is really important there is not just identifying the people to bring them into the agency, but how you keep them in the agency to keep doing the things that you've trained them to do, and also to keep doing the things that the technology can do as it evolves. Am I on the right track there?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we talk a lot about talent acquisition, right? How do we recruit and hire? But, actually retention is just as important, right? It actually helps you not have to continually go out there. So there is a lot of elements of that, and part of that is really getting the employee experience where we need it to be. And I look at AI as a way of getting there, right? I mean, so from where I stand, that AI is here at this point. It's not going to be here, it's here, right? And we need to really try to instill that culture of like, how do we make AI actually a part of our work? And I think, to me, this is where HR and the investment in HR makes a huge difference, right? If you think about it from a business function, what is the only function that hits every employee, every manager, every executive, regardless of what level of the organization they are? So really, from an IBM perspective, right, we were kind of client zero for ourselves. We've been doing this for about 7 years now. And they really chose HR. And then I will tell you the adoption rates that we ended up ultimately getting, right? And we got something like 1.7 million HR conversations a year, right? We got like 94% resolution at this point. We didn't get there all at once, by the way. It did take investment. But instilling that culture is really what allowed us to expand AI, right? So we can use it for customer services, which ultimately does lead to a better customer experience for our taxpayers, right? So it really is, I think HR is the right place, and my good friend Tracy here,
I'm never disagreeing with you. We all know that.
We're all there.
You talked about the fact that that progress didn't all happen at once. What are the stepping stones that you saw to get to from where you were to where you are today?
That's a great question. So I'll tell you, when we started this thing about 7 years ago, there was this perception, hey, let's just do a big bang. Let's do it, let's get everything right. And we tried to go to look at all the data and all the business processes. And I'll be honest, that was a disaster. It did not work. There was no uptake, there was no adoption. So they really reset, and they were willing to do that reset, and they went on a building block approach, right? Like, let's take let's pick that use case that makes sense. And really, I mean, from my perspective, it was use cases that were high volume. There was data available. I think that was really key. 3 is a definitive outcome. That's how actually we started, right? If you start overcomplicating where the outcome of whatever it is you're trying to do is uncertain, you're not setting yourself up for success. But I think especially for the HR and workforce, a moment that matters, right? Let's actually pick the things that people are going to actually care about. Right? So we did that, and when we really started that process with employee verification letters and how they balances, right? If you look at it from those perspectives, it requires a lot of data, right, to get it done. And it has a defined outcome. You're either getting the letter or you're not, right? You're either getting a vacation balance or not. And it was a moment that mattered for our employees, right? Because usually that's tied to like trying to get your first home loan, your car loans, right? Or you're planning a holiday. And once we got that and people start to use it, the trust started to build. And that allowed us to continue to build a catalog out. And eventually today, I will tell you, it used to be my muscle memory was, I'm always going to call my HR business partner, and you know how that works, right? You know, I got self-service tools, I got all these great tools, but my muscle memory was, I'm going to call HR because, you know, it's too hard, easier to do. I will tell you today, my muscle memory is I go to ask HR first, right? Which is our AI chatbot. And I'll tell you, even at the executive ranks right now, we have a 93% uptake at this point, right? And really it speaks to doing the building blocks, building this out and changing the culture. I think that's my biggest thing I'll tell folks is you have to change the culture. And if you start that with HR, it will leak into the other areas, right? It'll expand to the other business functions like an IT, for instance, like a travel and expense. But eventually it actually gets to the mission work, right? So even inside of IBM right now, we've implemented something called the IBM Consulting Advantage, which is literally AI chatbot to help us actually do our consulting work itself. And we've gotten there because we've trusted the AI. But what we introduced it through HR, got the culture there, and now that's where we are today.
Tracy, what are the challenges that you are having just within the HR workforce, not the broader IRS workforce? What are the challenges that you're having as far as finding all of the solutions that we've talked about so far on this show?
We really need people that are comfortable with technology, but even more important than that is getting people to trust that we will have the IT investments that we need to actually fully implement. HR is, they love to be technical and to use all the tools that could be available to us, but one of the issues is we rarely invest enough resources in an HR shop, whether it be people or technology. So if we can seize this moment to explain how an area like HR could benefit from the use of AI, it doesn't mean that the people are going away. I know that my colleagues before talked about that.
Yes.
We're always going to have people that need to teach the system how to operate. We constantly are changing the information and the data that comes out with regulation updates. We're always going to have a need for HR specialists, but if there's a way I can make their life easier to allow them to serve the customers, which is the entire agency, it's going to be better for everyone. And I love what Mike said, you know, bringing HR to the table at the beginning rather than at the end to get our input up front goes just such a long way, because we can actually point to the pain points. This is what we need it for. Let us help you get there.
Yeah, that actually follows on to the conversation we had in the last part of this program about including mission delivery partners in these discussions and making sure that they're involved in saying, this is the business process, this is what we really need to do. Maybe these two steps we don't need to do anymore. How has that been as far as changing culture at the IRS, or was that how it was when you walked in there year and a half, 2 years ago?
Year and a half. And actually, no, it is a change for us. And I have to say it's an exciting change, and we're seeing the dividends pay off. You know, having us all come together, we do understand our primary focus for anyone, whether we're back office operations or we're on the phones, it is serving the American taxpayer. So the more we get really good people around the table talking about how we can be solution oriented, not just figure out where there's going to be roadblocks, the better off we are. So you mentioned, and I heard Kashit mention when we talked about taxpayer services, you know, these are the people that are the front lines. I need to make sure they're well taken care of, whether it be that they're well trained, that they have the tools that they need. If we're introducing a new technology, I'm partnering with the administrator of taxpayer services to make sure we're putting training in place to make their jobs easier, because the easier I can facilitate a conversation between them and the American taxpayer, we're going to resolve those issues quicker, be able to get on to the next phone call, see the increase in our services to the American taxpayer, and demonstrate why these investments work.
When you look at some of the issues that you see across government, Mike, you've been worked with a number of agencies, worked with Tracy before at other agencies. How does what the IRS is dealing with and what Tracy's described, how does that fit with what you've seen in other organizations? Are the challenges, issues, problems, and so on similar, or are they peculiar on an agency-by-agency basis? Or maybe the answer is yes.
It's a yes to both.
Yeah.
Because I think as I mentioned to you, like, you know, when you're trying to adopt technology, right, and really to help the end mission, yes, there's some commonalities in terms of, I would say, adoption. What are the right places to start? How do you get them to adopt? How do they get them to use? But agency by agency, their culture is different, right? Their missions are different. So I always try to tell folks there's not a silver bullet to this, right? Like everyone would love to get the cookbook and say, you know, start here at number 1, number 2, number 3. I say, look, it's good to have a cookbook, right? I mean, it's good to have a partner that's been there and done that. But the reality is I never come into an agency and tell them, hey, you know, because IRS is very different than Veterans Affairs, which is very different than even GSA, right, where we met before, right? So, you know, if you take that approach and say, like, if you kind of think about what I told you before, and you come in and you say, I want that high volume transaction, right? But I said also the moment that matters, right? And the moment that matters for someone in the IRS employee is going to be very different than the moment that matters for someone in VA, right? So I always suggest that, you know, bring your stakeholders in, right? Try to figure out where the pain points are, figure out what the moment that matters is, so that you actually focus your energies on those types of points. Because if you don't get that one right, then you're not going to get the uptake. And I mean, I always like to tell, and Tracy knows what I'm talking about here, is like, we always tell someone like, hey, you know, pre-AI and all this, what do? We deploy like self-service technologies, right? Manager self-service, right, Tracy? We always put that technology out there, and we hope all these managers are going to use these great tools. And what happens?
They call me instead.
Yeah, they call you instead, right? Because look, the technology works. We know it works, but doesn't mean they're going to use it, right? So I think this is where AI gives us a very unique opportunity, right? We get to go one at a time. We get to do it in a very natural language way, where it becomes a much more natural interaction. And I'm hoping that, you know, when we pick the right ones out there and get it right, people start to develop the trust of the technology, and that will help drive the adoption. So I guess just in recap, no silver bullet, no one right thing for any agency, but there is the right way to do this, I believe.
What are you telling the Tracy DiMartinis of the world to think about now that maybe they don't have to deal with today, but is over the horizon for them, is coming down the road for them to think about in the next year or 2 years?
I think that for HR, I'm going to specify for HR that as technology progresses, right, we always have that holy grail inside of HR, right? Let me free up the bandwidth of my HR business partner so they can be more strategic, right, and they can do all of these things. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. But what I will also say is the job of the HR professional is going to change. There's going to be new skills that are needed to be in this, right? So this is not about replacement of people, right? If we're truly augmenting our HR professionals, understand there are some new skills that comes along with this. And if we prepare for that in advance, actually it's a win-win for everyone at that point.
Mike, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much for joining me. Tracy, terrific to have you as always.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you both for coming on today.
Thank you.
You can read more about the workforce at IRS and all the topics we talked about today at fedgovtoday.com. As you've probably learned from this program, the AI landscape in government is already filled with projects now and potential for the future. You'll stay up to date on FedGov Today TV, Sunday mornings at 10:30 on ABC7 in Washington, and on our YouTube channel, on the FedGov Today podcast every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts, and always on demand at fedgovtoday.com. Our thanks to the guests from the Internal Revenue Service and from IBM. I'm Francis Rose. Thank you for watching.